PaRappa the Rapper is a music rhythm video game that was released on the PlayStation in Japan in 1996 and later in other regions in 97. It would also later be ported to the PlayStation Portable or PSP along with the PlayStation 4 in later years. That would see you take on the role of the popular character, a young dog, on a quest to try and win the affection of his childhood crush by the name of Sonny Funny. Now it's all cartoon based and it will appeal to a younger audience dynamic, and for its time it was very quirky in how it presented itself. It had some backdrops that were elemented in 3D, but the visuals of the characters were all 2D, almost like paper, so it was definitely very different. It stood out. There was nothing like it at the time, in fairness. It was quirky and it set its own theme and standard, and in many cases it's often considered as the first proper rhythm themed video game ever in existence that set the foundations or the format for a lot of other games to follow. The game would also be followed up with a few sequels and even spin-offs later on the likes of the PlayStation 2 and even also on the PS1 with Jam Lamy that would follow a similar format. And whatever you may say about the game, yeah, the plot is quirky, it's nuanced, it's aimed at a younger audience, but it's very, how would you put it, it's unusual, often seen as very cheesy. Like even going back, I remember playing this game for the first time on a demo. Now I thought it was very cool playing like the first demo in the Onion Master's dojo when he's teaching you how to rap for the first time, but yeah, some of the dialogue in the game is very, very cheesy, and it's almost like you'd be sitting there holding your head and you're just like, what am I listening to? You'd be embarrassed nearly to be seen playing it, especially if you were a wee bit older at the time. But for younger audiences, they would have had a blast with this and thought nothing of it. But even with that, it did appeal to so many different dynamics of players, both young and old, because even players that weren't that familiar or well versed in video games could get into it, because the concept of the game was simple, but yet at the same time was tricky to execute. It was just time and button presses in order to enact different motions to follow along with the events that were happening on screen. So even non-players could literally pick that up to a certain degree. But even with all its quirks and nuances and even cheesy elements, the game was well received across the board, especially on the PlayStation when it released, because like I said, there was nothing like it at the time. So much to a point that it was considered as one of the best selling games between 1997 and early 1998, selling well over 1 million units across the board. It was just a very, very popular game that stayed in the sales charts for quite a long time. Now even when the game was later added to other consoles with the PSP and PS4, right, it didn't receive as well a reviews, but you have to remember it was pretty much a remake of the first game, and by that time people's tastes and audiences, like when you think of it, that's a good 15-20 plus years nearly, that people's ideas and trends and just in general the way everything is nowadays has totally changed compared to what it was back then. What would have been a new thing back then, you see it in abundance nowadays. It's not even really a thing anymore. But I suppose when we look back to rhythm games, PaRappa the Rapper was pretty much the one that did lay the foundation for everything that was to come after it, and it is the one that people often refer to when they're looking back at these titles. So for all intents and purposes, it may not appeal to some, but it will appeal to others. It's charming, it's unique, it's cheesy, but it just has that unique aspect to it that is timeless in many ways, especially when you look at the visuals. It doesn't look out of place even in today's mainstream market, and most of us growing up in some shape or form probably would have played this game, or at least attempted playing a demo of it in some shape or form. So I would love to know your thoughts of PaRappa the Rapper on the PlayStation, and what did you think of it overall? Were you a fan of this unusual style game, or did you shy away from it back in the day? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other unusual and quirky and yet even cheesy games like this who are also released on the PlayStation, because let's just put it this way, there's a lot more than you may think, then be sure to check out the playlist here on screen to see a lot more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.